Good morning. Today I'm meeting a friend at the Austin Public Library, and we're both riding our bikes there, so I thought we'd play a game of plus one minus two. This is a game come up with by Tom from the YouTube channel Shifter, and it's essentially where we're both going to ride our bikes there and give 1 point to Austin for every positive thing that is useful or helpful or makes cycling safer. And we're going to take away 2 points for everything that is not useful and that makes cycling more dangerous. And at the end, we'll compare our notes. I'm coming from North Austin, she's coming from South Austin. So we're going to see how the two halves of the city compare in terms of their bike infrastructure. And then we'll have a little chat about it at the end. So without any further ado, let's get into it. All right, so we're starting off here on a quiet neighborhood street. And you know what? The street's a little bit wide, but it's low traffic and it's well shaded by a lot of trees. So I'm totally fine riding in the street here, plus one for Austin. So you can see the bike route sign posted up on the right there. I have found very little correlation between good bike infrastructure and those bike signs, so I'm not going to ding points for it, but I'm certainly not adding one. All right, we're crossing with the light now, and here we can see that we have a bit of a painted bike lane. Unfortunately, it's not a protected lane, so it is considered a bike gutter. As you can see, I'm partially riding in the gutter, so plus one for having a bike lane, minus two for it being a gutter bike lane. Here we can see that the painted line delineating the bike lane actually splits into two to create a little bit of a buffer. Now this is, again, one step better than just a single line. It gives a little bit of space in between cars and bikes, so that'll be plus one for Austin. It also just so happens that earlier this week they repainted these bike lanes, and some of them were fading pretty bad. It was getting difficult to see them, so I appreciate the maintenance in keeping them visible for everyone, bikes and drivers included. Here you can see the bike lane is actually quite wide, and again, that's something I appreciate. It gives you a little bit more room if you're riding with someone else. That means you can ride side by side and chat and still stay in the bike lane. Plus one. We're just passing some new curbs where they've put a little bit of a lip on the edge of the curb to stop cars from cutting that corner so much and keep pedestrians on the sidewalk safer. So plus one for that. All right, we're turning on to another quiet neighborhood street. This is low traffic street just because there aren't many people who live here or use it. It's not a thoroughfare. And if there ever are any cars here, we can easily sort it out who goes where because both of us are traveling pretty slowly. Now you might notice that I did not stop at that stop sign. Now it has been proven multiple times that having cyclists treat stop signs as yield instead of stop signs is actually safer for them. So that is going to be the technique that I use throughout this video. Now it's actually against Texas state law to do that. Texas state law requires that cyclists stop at stop signs. However, in the City of Austin's bike plan that they just released earlier this year, they have acknowledged that that is actually more dangerous for cyclists, and the city is working on some lobbying efforts, I believe, to have the state change that, as other states and cities have recently. But unfortunately, that's not the law yet, so minus two for having a law that is dangerous to cyclists. Now I'm turning here onto another painted bike lane with another buffer. So this is having different bike thoroughfares connected by a quiet neighborhood street, and that's really good, so plus one. As we can see here, they were doing some construction during the week on the sidewalk, and they've closed the bike lane for that. So even though they're not doing work on it now, they've still kept the bike lane closed, which means that I have to divert out into traffic that is dangerous for cyclists to have to move into the car lanes. These speed bumps are nice as a traffic calming device for cars, so plus one. However, elsewhere in the city, there are flex posts between the bike lane and the speed bumps so that cars don't swerve into the bike lane to avoid the speed bumps like they often do on this street. So minus two for no flex posts protecting the cyclists from the speed bumps here. All right, and we have yet another quiet neighborhood street. This one is quite a bit too wide in my opinion, although we still have a fair amount of shade, which is nice, because days like today can get quite hot here in Austin. We've turned onto another bike lane here. However, it's quite narrow, and the big problem with it is that there's a 4 to 5 lane road here next to me now, with no buffer. And although I filmed this pretty early on a Saturday morning, so there's not much traffic here, this road is absolutely terrifying to ride down during a busy time of day, when lots of cars are passing you quite quickly and very close to you. So -2 for an unprotected bike lane on a wide and fast road. There's a slip lane that crosses to the bike lane right here. -2 for prioritizing car speed and convenience over cyclist and pedestrian safety. As you can see, the road here is pretty bumpy, and unfortunately that is very common here in Austin, and I think Texas in general. The road quality is not very high, and priority is not given to filling potholes, especially in bike lanes, which if you're driving in a car, you might not notice the bumps and potholes that are this size too much, but if you're on a bike, it can be really uncomfortable or even dangerous. -2 for not maintaining the streets. Unfortunately, you can see a lot of gravel, grass, and other debris here in the gutter portion of this painted gutter bike lane. They do have street sweepers in Austin. However, for most streets, they only get swept once every 2 months or so. And for protected bike lanes, they say they sweep them once every 2 weeks. However, I've seen them go much longer, where lots of debris like this is allowed to build up. So -2 for not prioritizing keeping streets clean, especially bike lanes where, again, we have smaller wheels than cars, so debris in the bike lane can be dangerous. This is a pretty long stretch on this wide and shadeless road. I think every road could do with some trees, both for decoration, make things more pleasant for people walking and cycling on the street, and even those driving. But in hot places like Austin, shade while you're riding in a bike lane is absolutely essential. So -2 for no shade here. All right, I've turned onto a street, and we have a small painted buffer in the bike lane again. It's not much, but I'll give +1 for that. -2 for this intersection. I'm going to be turning left onto a 2-way protected bike lane. There's no left turns allowed for cars, but it is for bikes, but there's no easy way for bikes to make that turn without going in the car lane. So although bikes are allowed to turn left, it can be quite dangerous sometimes, so -2. Okay, and here we have our first protected bike lane. This is a 2-way protected bike lane for much of its length. It's protected with concrete, as well as some flex posts in the middle, so +1 for the protected bike lane. Unfortunately, there are still big stretches like here where there's no protection, because instead of having a driveway for all cars to go into, it's sort of open parking all along the block, so cars are still allowed to turn across any point in the bike lane. -2. And I love this portion because here we finally have a nice shaded section with lots of trees, lots of mid-rise buildings, and a protected bike lane. This is a really pleasant place to ride, and one of my favorite bike lanes in town. So +1. This area is right next to the campus of UT Austin, and it's where a lot of the undergrads live here. So the undergrads get to experience a nice, walkable, bikeable, urban environment while they're going to school here, which I think is a great thing. Morning. I was able to say good morning to those other people passing on bikes, and that's definitely something that you can't do when you're driving a car down the street. So I'm going to give +1 just to biking in general for being able to say good morning to people. So we see those trash cans in the bike lanes, and I think a lot of times it's not exactly clear where people are supposed to put the trash cans, on the sidewalk, in the bike lane, or on the protection of the bike lane. So that's something that Austin could do better, is communicate more clearly where trash cans should go, and then have the garbage truck drivers also know so they put them back in the same place. So -2. Here's something that I rarely see, and there is long-term construction going on in the building to my right here. So they've actually closed the street completely to cars, but maintained the bike lane and a sidewalk that is covered and protected from falling debris, which is really nice to see. So +1. I love riding in places like this where it's quiet, there's not too many car sounds that you can hear, and you can hear the birds chirping on a nice weekend morning. So this intersection actually has a traffic light for bicycles, which can detect a cyclist waiting here at the corner where I'm at, so +1. Unfortunately, that has nothing to do with the timing of the light, and oftentimes here I can be waiting for several minutes while there are no cars crossing the other direction because the light is on a timer instead of a sensor that detects whether there are cars actually moving through the intersection or not. So in many countries at this point, now that all of the cars have passed, the lights would immediately change and let someone else go through the other direction. However, I'm just going to wait here for a while longer for the light's timer to finish. -2 for traffic light timing. All right, we finally got the green bike symbol. Oh, but can you see it's yellow already? So while cars, even on low traffic times, have minutes to pass, the bike light is green for all of 3 seconds. So -2 for having to rush the bike signal. All right, there we have a Shero, which is usually not a good form of bike infrastructure and has been shown to actually make riding bikes more dangerous in some situations instead of providing a bike lane. So -2 for the Shero. We're on another quiet street here, and even at the busiest times of day, this is how busy this street is, even though it's going north-south into downtown. So I honestly think that they could easily make this street much narrower, make some more room for a wider sidewalk, for the protected bike lane to continue, plant some trees, and still have plenty of room for the amount of car traffic that uses this road. -2 for a street that's far too wide for the amount of cars that use it. Here we have another intersection, and this one has no bike light and doesn't change unless a car comes and sits on the sensor to the left of me. So if I wanted to trigger the signal, I would have to walk up onto the sidewalk to go hit the pedestrian beg button. So -2. Because a car pulled up next to me, the light finally changed, so I'm able to cross. Here we have a bulb out in the sidewalk. So the road actually narrows here, so it's easier for pedestrians to cross because the street is narrower, and cars have to slow down because of that. +1. We're coming up to a roundabout. Now, roundabouts have been shown to be safer for everybody involved, bikes, pedestrians, and cars themselves. So +1 for the roundabouts. Here we have a weird view of single-family homes directly next to skyscrapers in downtown Austin. Austin's zoning is pretty restrictive, and so apartments and high-rises are limited in most places. Thankfully, the current city council is working on changing some of those zoning laws, so hopefully we can see a more urban Austin that allows more types of housing to lower housing costs in the near future. But for now, -2. We're crossing over 6th Street, which is one of the hubs of nightlife in Austin. At this intersection, I can go through before the light changes because there's a leading pedestrian interval, or LPI, which changes the walk sign in the crosswalk to the walk signal before the light turns green. Now, in Austin, cyclists are also allowed to use the LPI, which means that pedestrians and cyclists can enter the intersection before cars do, thus making them more visible to cars. So that helps prevent cars from turning right into us without seeing us, and stuff like that. So +1 for the leading pedestrian interval. All right, and here I'm going to enter a shared use path that is for people walking and people on bikes, and it serves as a modal filter where cars cannot go through this area, but bikes and pedestrians can. +1. This is a nice shared use path along Shoal Creek. +1. This path varies in wideness a lot throughout its course, and some areas are better than others. Some are quite narrow and it's difficult to pass people going different speeds. Other areas it's wider and better for that. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but I know in future paths the city and the Parks Department are working on consistency. It's really nice riding by the river without the threat of getting hit by a car. So I know I said it already just for the existence of the path, but it's a nice setting and it's very comfortable, so +1. And here we're at the library. There's a shared street that has bollards separating pedestrian and driver areas. +1 for bollards. Unfortunately, there are some unhoused people here who are forced to sleep on the street at night. Like I said, Austin City Council is currently working on a few measures that would change the zoning and allow affordable housing to be built more easily, so hopefully that will help in the future. There are some nice bike racks right out front of the library here, and there are also more protected bike racks down along the shared use path by the river. So great bike parking at the library, +1. All right, here goes Kelsey's commute. So let's see. This is my first time watching it, so I'll give you my first impressions. First things first, looks like she's riding on the sidewalk for now. Now, in a lot of places that's not allowed. However, on some roads, with the amount of traffic and the poor quality of bike lanes, if there are any, it makes people have to ride on the sidewalk for their own safety. So, -2 immediately for apparently not being comfortable enough for her to ride in the street. I also noticed this road looks like a strode. That is not a street where people can be productive and have businesses and shopping and restaurants, and not a road, which is meant to transport cars quickly, but a mix of the two, where there's lots of businesses, meaning there's lots of driveways that cut off the bike lane and the sidewalk, and means that the street is dangerous, it's unpleasant, it's too wide. So -2 for strode. Something that's common for stroads like this is that they don't have many trees because they want cars to go fast and they don't want trees to interfere if the cars go off the road. So there seems to be very little shade. -2. Not sure what's going on with the quality of the sidewalk here, but hopefully they're in the process of fixing that. -2 for bad sidewalk quality. All right, it looks like she's turned onto a road with a bike lane protected by flex posts. Now, flex posts are not the best protection because if a car does actually go through them, they won't stop it from impacting somebody on the bike lane. However, they are a bit of a visual deterrent and much better than paint alone. So, +1 for a bike lane protected by flex posts. Well, it looks like we have somebody parked in the bike lane, so Kelsey's having to look behind her and go around. Or, no, I might be mistaken. I think the bike lane just ended. So, -2 for bike lanes that just end and throw you out onto the street. One of the biggest problems with Austin's bike network is that it is disconnected from itself in so many places. So bike lanes will just end and leave you in the middle of the road, and there's no clear instructions on if and where the bike lane will continue again. Oh, and it looks like she's going off of this alley through a modal filter onto a shared use path in a park. So +1 for a modal filter and +1 for a shared use path. Poor tree trimming. Looks like she has to get off and duck her head a little bit, -2. So this route is really one that it seems like you probably have to be a local to be familiar with, because they're often left off of navigation apps that have bike navigation, such as Google Maps. So -2 for inadequate signage. All right, so it looks like she is able to move on to this quiet neighborhood street on her ride here to get to the next segment of bike path or the next big road. So +1 for being able to use a quiet neighborhood street. This intersection looks like it has curbs that are pushed back so that there is more room for cars to turn at higher speeds. So that is something that, one, wastes a lot of space in our neighborhoods, makes the road even wider and harder to cross for pedestrians, and is dangerous for people trying to cross the street because cars are able to go faster to go around those wider curves. So -2. It looks like she made a wrong turn. Again, the navigational tools for bikes in a lot of cities are really not that great, so it's difficult to find routes that people are comfortable with. They're hard to find on apps, and they're hard to find on street signage. So -2 for a bike network that's difficult to navigate. That sidewalk looks extremely narrow and difficult for pedestrians to use, especially those with mobility needs. -2. I don't know why they made the sidewalk into this shape. It doesn't seem convenient for anyone. -2. All right, so it looks like here there's a bit of a busy road with no bike infrastructure, so she's had to take the sidewalk again. -2. And the sidewalk isn't even kept clear of debris. -2 again. I've noticed at a lot of these intersections that there's crossing in the direction that she's riding, but there's no ramps or crosswalks to cross the main street, meaning that if people living near here or just walking nearby want to cross that main road next to her, that they would have to walk quite a ways to the nearest major intersection like this one in order to actually cross the street. That makes it difficult for people to walk or ride their bikes, even on short journeys when the streets make it hard for you to move. -2. All right, this street seems a much better width, as well as some nice housing being built next to it. It looks like the street narrows here, and there's some nice crosswalks put in for use by people taking the bus here at that bus stop. +1 for making mobility of the bus riders easier. It looks like cars are passing her pretty closely on this street, and there's not really a space where she's protected from them, so -2.
Morning.
Again, getting to say good morning to people on the street, whether they're walking or riding bikes, is something that you really don't get to do when you're driving a car. +1 for just how enjoyable riding a bike is. Some speed bumps to slow down car traffic, but allow bikes to pass through, +1. There's a planted concrete median here in the street to narrow the car lanes and slow down traffic, +1. Although there's some traffic calming on the street, like the center island and the speed bumps, it doesn't seem to be having too big an effect on these cars, who seem to be passing pretty closely and pretty quickly. All to have the bike catch up to them at the next stoplight. There's no protection for the bike here at the intersection, so again, she goes up onto the sidewalk. A lot of places, even where there are bike lanes, lose their protection at intersections for maximum convenience for car drivers, which is unfortunate because that's exactly where cyclists need the most protection and are most likely to be hit. So -2 for no protection for cyclists at intersections. Looks like she's able to use a LPI as well, so +1 for the LPI. I do think the skyline for downtown Austin is looking pretty nice these days. Love to see more housing being built, love to see less parking being built, and love to see more investment in our public transit infrastructure and bike infrastructure being made, all in downtown Austin. There are some bike racks next to this shared use trail, +1. Even if places are easy to get to by bike, if it's not easy to leave your bike there securely, people won't do it. This looks like a nice little park with a shared use path. +1 for this route, not available for cars. There's a shared use hike and bike trail there to the right. It's a really nice way to ride alongside, walk alongside, or walk or jog alongside the Colorado River or Lady Bird Lake, +1. This is a busy thoroughfare though, so for people who don't want to ride on the decomposed granite that is the hike and bike trail, they could use some bike infrastructure on the street, -2. Especially leading up to this, which is a pedestrian and bike bridge, +1 for giving pedestrians and people riding bikes a way to cross the river without having to interact with cars. Guaranteed that everyone crossing the river in a car is not having as much fun as everyone on this bridge. This extension of the bridge allows people to cross over Cesar Chavez without having to interact with traffic, +1. Bollards to protect pedestrians, always nice to see, and metal instead of a flex post as well, +1. It's a shame that that pedestrian and bike bridge doesn't connect to more pedestrian and bike infrastructure on this side to allow it to connect to the greater bike network in Austin, -2. Car passing way too close, -2. The route she's taking is the main way to connect from that pedestrian bridge into the city. There really should be bike infrastructure connecting the two if we want people to be coming up from South Austin into downtown by bike, -2. And here we are at the library. We made it, another safe ride. This street does have a few bollards to protect pedestrians, so a final +1 for that. And there's bike racks at the library, so +1.
We made it.
So there's a lot we can learn from how Austin is building out their bike infrastructure. There's some good areas and some bad areas, both in North and South Austin, but it seemed to me like North Austin had a lot more focus on new infrastructure being built. So we really need to make sure that the biking and transit infrastructure in Austin is distributed across the city equitably in order to allow access to absolutely everybody. Now, rapid change is possible. Just look at a city like Paris here. In the last few years, Mayor Anne Hidalgo has taken a really hard stance that biking is important for this city, and has taken a lot of steps to ensure that Paris becomes a 15 or 20-minute city, especially by walking and biking. So there's been a lot of infrastructure investment in bike lanes over the last few years, and that has absolutely transformed the city. The last time I was here in 2011, I didn't really see anyone riding their bike. And behind me, even still on a busy road here, with a wide bike lane, you can see that many people have shifted their commutes, their deliveries, over to cycling. And that's something that's exciting to see, because cities can make a choice to invest in their cycling infrastructure and create the future that we want to see. So Austin is doing really well. They're building lots of bike lanes, and they're building them better than they used to. We're not done yet though, and just like Paris isn't done, they keep investing. Austin needs to keep investing in not only our cycling infrastructure, but also our transit infrastructure. And if we can keep making that investment, we're going to see the future that we want, where anyone can get around Austin without a car by walking, biking, or by transit. So it's a change that I'm looking forward to seeing through, and I can't wait to see what the city brings us.